An obscure comet named 17P Holmes shocked astronomers on October 24, 2007 with a spectacular eruption. It quickly became the largest object in the solar system, bigger even than the sun. This exploding blue star was the fulfillment of a 200-year-old Hopi prophecy, opening a 7-year window, which has put us squarely in the end times. The Mayans are in complete agreement with the Hopi regarding these end times, as both are conscious survivors of Atlantis and hold the memory of the Earth for the past 26,000 years. According to Robert Ghost Wolf, the return of the blue star will be the alarm clock that is the dawn of this new day, telling us that a new world is coming. Bob Frissell is a master rebirther and flower of life facilitator. His books, Nothing in This Book is True, but It's Exactly How Things Are, and Transforming Through 2012 are regarded as underground spiritual classics and are published in 17 languages. Would you join me in giving a warm welcome to our precious Bob Frissell?
Thank you. Thank you. Well, the name of my talk, as you can see, is The Shift of the Ages. So I guess we better get going here. Just want to switch here. This is a little more pleasant to look at. But let me just, in introduction here, say a couple things about myself, and then I'll introduce my talk, and then we'll get going. Probably, I'm best known for my book here. A lot of people have very interesting titles for this, but nothing in this book is true. First came out about 15 years ago, but a lot has happened since then, and I rewrote the book, and it's just recently come out. Basically, in my eyes, this is a new book. Well, in 1992, I met this man, Drunvalo, and my life began to change dramatically. I began to study his work, and 2 years later, I was trained to become a teacher of the Flower of Life workshop, something that I've been doing ever since. And by the way, I will be giving the Flower of Life workshop here in North Hollywood, March 11th through the 13th. Okay. Let's go back. Keep this one up here for a while. Let me just, by way of introduction, say a few things here. To begin, we've been in a separate state for a long, long time. 13,000 years is a long time by just about anybody's estimation, and that's about how long we've been in separation. We're immersed in polarity consciousness, and that means that we judge everything. It's either good or it's bad, it's right or it's wrong, and we agree or we disagree. And of course, this very act of judging is what keeps us locked into this mode of perception. So as an example of our separate way, we usually tend to think of something outside of ourselves in order to help us get a job done. If the temperature in this room is not to our liking, we'll go to the thermostat. We'll turn up the heat, we'll turn it down, or we'll turn on the air conditioner. And it's kind of interesting. I don't think too many of us have thought about it in the way that I'm going to present it here for the moment. And that is that in spite of the fact that we have all these incredible technological advancements, which leads us to think that we're pretty clever, I would suggest that there's a part of us that is missing the point, because we've long since given up our own internal ability to do some of these things for ourselves, and we've gotten to the point to where we have no idea that they exist within us. There are certain people on this planet who do not understand us. The Aboriginals, for example, from Australia, they really don't know what need means, because if they need something, it magically appears before them. That's so because they're in harmony with life. If you look at the Hopis, They don't even have a word for anything outside of themselves. They're going to speak, for example, of a bird perched in a tree that is in within. So they don't really understand us very well. Well, we stepped outside of this balance, and we've lost sight of the fact that contained within us, under certain conditions allow whatever we say, whatever we feel, whatever we think, to manifest interest just immediately in the reality. But we've forgotten that. There is a part of us that really doesn't have a problem with unity, and that's the part of us that, if you can remember, maybe when you're about this tall, you're 4 or 5 years old, you're standing out, you're looking up at the night sky, and you don't have the words for it, but you don't need them. You can just feel it. You can feel the sense, the awe, your interconnection to all of the cosmos. And I've talked to a lot of people who had at that age even more than that. They've told me that they had communication going on with angelic guides and other spirit guides. But most of them told me too that at a certain point, they decided that in order to get along in this culture, they pretty much had to let go of that. But that part is still alive within us. That's the part that knows unity. There's another part, however, within us that does not know unity at all. It's our left brain. It's our logical side. When it looks out at the reality, what it sees is division. It sees separation everywhere it looks. It's not going to get any help from the one source that at least logically you would turn to, and that's religion. You look at religion, you've got God and the devil, and you've got our religion is better than yours. Obviously, there's no help there. Well, we are beginning to take steps back towards unity. We are beginning to wake up. We're beginning to remember who we are and why we're here. These are exciting times. 16,000 years ago, we violated galactic law. And we didn't just kind of do it, we did it big time. We created a condition that almost destroyed the planet. And as a direct result of that, we fell many, many dimensional levels. You see, we used to be on a much, much higher level of awareness than we are right now. But as a direct result of this misuse of power, in essence, we were in free fall until finally we crash landed down here on the dense third dimensional aspect of the reality. And along with that, we forgot everything. Well, even though it's not part of our natural or normal evolutionary pattern, there are no accidents. And in the larger scheme of things, this fall was necessary. Necessary in order to allow for an even greater possibility. And that's a possibility that we are living now. This is happening now. What I'm going to be giving you then really is sort of a big screen view of the ascension of our planet into higher consciousness. I'm going to check in with the Ascended Masters and the Melchizedeks, see what they have to say. And also the Hopis and the Mayans are going to be weighing in, so here we go. Let me first begin by defining a few terms for you. When I speak of ascension, what I'm talking about is the ability to consciously move from one world to another. And this is the ability to take your body, to turn it into a ball of light, and to disappear from this world, to reappear in whatever world you have tuned to. and you're just as real there as you are here. It is different from resurrection, because in resurrection you die, you drop the body, but you do it in a bit more of a conscious state. And so you're able to reform the light body on the other side. That in turn takes you into the higher worlds. They are different processes. Introducing the Merkaba. Actually, Merkaba is 3 words. As you can see here, Mer, Ka, and Ba. So Mer means counter-rotating fields of light. Ka means spirit, and Ba refers to body or reality. What you have here then is a counter-rotating field of light that takes both spirit and body with it. It's a vehicle. It's a vehicle of ascension, and it's actually a lot more than that. Really, it's much more than that. There's not anything that isn't, because it's the image through which all things were created. And that image happens to be around your body. Now, this is only part of it right here. Actually, it begins much smaller than this. As small, in fact, as the original 8 cells, which are shaped in the form of a star tetrahedron. And that's the shape you're looking at here. And then out around the body, you've got this primary shape, another star tetrahedron. And from there, it goes to form other geometrical figures, other shapes known as platonic solids, until finally it extends a full 50 to 60 feet around the body. Well, this is what it looks like when it's activated, when these fields are turned on, when it's a living energy field around the body. It's dormant in most people, but there are special conditions under which these fields can be turned on. And in fact, that really is the essence of the Flower of Life workshop that we teach. Learning how to take these fields and create this living energy field around the body and see where that takes us. Well, I need to introduce this man a little bit. You're looking at Egyptian hieroglyphics here, and this is the image that the Egyptians knew as Thoth. He's an ascended master. He's been around for a long, long time, 52,000 years to be exact. And most of the ascended masters are hanging out on a higher level of the Earth's consciousness. But there's a certain few who have decided to stay back. You're probably familiar with Saint Germain. Perhaps you've heard of Merlin. And then there's Thoth. Examples of 3 ascended masters who, even though they could have left, for whatever particular reason, have decided to stay back and act as teachers. What really happens is that when you reach a certain state of awareness, you realize beyond any doubt whatsoever that what happens here, happens there, that everything is completely interconnected. There's only one spirit moving through life, no matter what level it might be on. And so for that reason, compassion can sometimes take you over, and then you decide that you will stay back and act as a teacher. He did take off for a couple thousand years or so. He would go to planets that are living. What you're looking at here is our neighbor Venus. And if you look at the 3rd dimension, you're not going to find much. But if you click up into the higher overtones of the 4th dimension, you're going to find the most advanced race in our solar system, and that's the Hathors. He went to the 3rd planet out from Sirius B, spent some time there, watching to see how they did it. And you can be sure he spent some time in the Pleiades. Well, there's a lot more I could say about Thoth, but let me just give you this. What he's holding in his hand here is papyrus reeds, because papyrus is the first paper, and He is the person who introduced writing to us. Now, that single act was very, very, very powerful for us. It caused us to change our consciousness. We became a polarity consciousness mind. We changed our height. And it was all necessary in order to give us this intermediate stepping stone that is necessary to get to the next level, an even higher level of unity consciousness than we previously knew. This bird on the top of his head is called the ibis bird. It's found in the papyrus reeds, and this is what it looks like. Just one more thing I'll say. You can barely see this down here, but he's holding something called the Ankh, and that's a symbol of immortality. This orange oval above his head is called the egg of metamorphosis, meaning that when you go through a consciousness change, you go through tremendous change, both of a physical nature and also of an awareness nature. And here he is shown writing down the history. Well, this is his wife, Shizat. She too is an ascended master, who's been around for a long, long time. Moving right ahead here. These are wheels that are found on some of the ceilings in some of the older temples in Egypt. And Egyptian archaeologists really do not know what they are or what they represent, but really they're great keys because they're related to the harmonics of music, they're related to the harmonics of the electromagnetic spectrum, and they also relate to dimensional changes, which I'm going to talk about here in just a moment. It's also proof that the Egyptians really understood what the flower of life represented. And they didn't just etch it into walls in their temples just as something to do, but really they knew what this represented, because it takes tremendous knowledge to understand what's in here and what these represent. Now, you can barely see this down here, so I'm going to switch. You see there's a group of people walking in a straight line with these ovals over their head. These would be orange if this was in color. And then all of a sudden they make a 90-degree turn and they're walking off in this direction. Well, if you're familiar with UFOs at all, if you've perhaps seen them or if you've read about them, you've heard perhaps that they go streaking across the sky and then they make a 90-degree turn and they're gone. Well, what's happening when they make that 90-degree turn is they are changing to a different wavelength dimension. All dimensional worlds are separated by 90 degrees. So at this point, I need to lay a little bit more groundwork, because when we talk about dimensions, what do I mean? You can talk to a mathematician, they're going to go into all this stuff about hyperspace and what have you, and I don't mean any of that. All I mean is that every universe, every single universe that's ever been created, and there's lots of them, every single one of them is right here in this room, passing right through the space. They're all interlinked, and the only difference between one and the next one is wavelength. And by wavelength, I mean this. If you're looking at a sine wave here, this thing is just going to repeat itself. So if you measure from here to here, where it returns again, if you measure it in a straight line, that is wavelength. And wavelength, in many ways, really is the key to everything. So, you've got a huge range of wavelengths. Some are so small, they're unbelievably tiny. Others are so long, they would look almost like straight lines. And that gives you the electromagnetic spectrum. So, we live in a universe that is huge. And if you look at the macrocosm and go out to the planets, out to the galaxies, and in fact, as far out as the imagination can go, quasars and whatever else is out there, you take all of that and then go into the atomic and subatomic particles combined with the space in which we live. All of that is one universe, and it has a wavelength of 7.23 centimeters. And this is what it is. If you look at quantum physics, any object can be looked upon either as particles, or you can look upon it as sound, which is wavelength. And if you took all the objects in the universe and measured them out and averaged them out, you would find it's 7.23 centimeters long. And that's our universe. Well, the universes themselves are separated in wavelength distances exactly the same as music. So if you have a piano, this is Nora, by the way. Probably heard of her, she's an accomplished musician. I love kitties, I just had to do this. So if you look at a piano, you take an octave from C to C, that's the 8 white keys. But in addition to the 8 white keys, you also have the 5 black keys, which added together gives you the chromatic scale. Actually, the 13th note is the return, so it's 12 notes in the chromatic scale. Now, music, along with the electromagnetic spectrum, is holographic in nature. And what that means then is that in between each and every one of these 12 notes, you've got 12, it's kind of like a holographic representation of the whole thing, 12 smaller steps, 12 equal yet smaller steps in between each one of them. Now, in dimensional terms, the 12 times 12 gives you the 144 dimensional worlds that perhaps you've heard about. One more thing I'll say too, and that is, according to the Bible, there's 144,000. Well, there's 144,000 cultures that come from each of these 144 dimensional levels. That would be 1,000 from each one of them. And whenever a planet is about to go through a major change, they evidently come and help to oversee these. And these are cultures, huge cultures, not individuals. Well, back to Nora and our piano. Obviously, there's more than one octave on a piano. It's going to keep repeating itself a number of times in each direction. And so, what you have here is one octave. The return becomes the first note in a brand new octave, keeps repeating itself a number of times in each direction, and you begin to get an idea of how vast this multidimensional system is. Really, it's the same thing as a TV set, because you turn on your TV set and you're tuning to a particular wavelength transmission. If you change the channel, you're getting a different image on your screen because you've changed your wavelength transmission. Well, in many ways, it's that simple. The additional factor is, however, that in dimensional terms, you also need to make a rotation of 90 degrees. And if you did that, if you knew how, or remembered that in fact you do know how, change your conscious wavelength in combination with making a 90-degree turn, you would literally disappear out of this room. You'd be gone. And you would reappear in whatever world that you have tuned to. And you'd be just as real there as you are here. Well, there is more here. What I'm trying to show, and this doesn't show up at all, is black. Very black. What I'm getting at is the fact that there's void between each of these dimensional worlds. And the void that we can relate to is that it would be a total sensory deprivation experience, meaning the blackest black that you could ever imagine, no frame of reference, so movement is not possible because what would you move in relationship to? And so each of these 144 dimensional worlds is separated by voidness. And the the octave itself is separated by what you might call a huge wall of voidness, a much thicker wall of voidness than the voidness you will find in any of these 144 dimensional worlds or between them. Probably it was placed there intentionally, so you can't get through that wall until you're mature enough to be able to do it. And there is a level of awareness that is able to do that. They, by the way, are known as Melchizedeks. Now, really, interdimensional travel here is not that big a deal. I mean, just about everybody knows how to do that. It's just that we forgot. We forgot a lot more than just this too. But just because you can travel interdimensionally, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can stay in the new world you've entered into, because they're all completely different. You could easily be freaked out by some of them or many of them. But if you have mastered the ability to not only go anywhere, but to remain conscious and to remain stable, then that is what teaches you how to get through this great wall and into the next octave, into what we would call the 13th dimension. And so it's a level of awareness that's known as Melchizedek. When they get here, they can stay here if they want. However, they also are given a choice to come back, and because they can go anywhere, you can imagine that they would be instantly called to wherever there is a dimensional problem. Well, coming back to these guys, the Ascended Masters, they're hanging out on a much higher level of the Earth's consciousness, pretty much way up here, the higher overtones of the 6th dimension, which tells us that there's other worlds here. There's lots of other worlds. There's much more going on with this planet, and in fact any other planet, than would, just meet the eye. There's other worlds. And right now, you're locked into this particular world, so in order to get to any of these other worlds, you have to be aware of them, you have to know how to change your conscious wavelength, and you have to know how to make this magic return. So, where we are is right now sitting on the 3rd dimensional aspect of planet Earth. Where we are going is into the higher overtones of the 4th dimension. That's either the 10th, 11th, or 12th overtone of the 4th dimension. And this, by the way, is not something that's going to be happening at some point in the indeterminate future. It is something that is happening right now. We are very much engaged in this process. So let's just take a moment and take a quick journey through our 7.23 centimeter wavelength universe. These are from the Hubble telescope, and kind of like the Hubble greatest hits, if you will. The best picture, voted the best picture, the Sombrero Galaxy here, 28 million light years from Earth. It just happens to have 800 billion suns, and it's only 50,000 light years across. If you ever wondered what a black hole looks like, there you go. And the Ant Nebula. Nebulas being a cloud of dust and gas. This nebula, even though it's in our galaxy, is somewhere between 3,000 to 6,000 light years away. Here's another nebula. This one's 5,000 light years away. The Cat's Eye Nebula. Here's an interesting one, the Hourglass Nebula. The Cone Nebula, 2.5 light years in length. Here's a galaxy that is pumping out stars at a rate that is 100 times faster than stars in our galaxy. And this has only been going on for 100 million years or so. Here's two galaxies that are colliding. This is two that's been going on for a few 100 million years. Here's a solar flare, not from our sun. And then there's the space in which we live. A little bit of California scenery. I live in the redwoods, so I just had to do this. Big Sur, not too bad. Then there's the microcosm, down to atomic and subatomic particles. All of that is one universe. That's our universe. It has a wavelength of 7.23 centimeters. And there's 143 other universes just as vast as this one in one octave of existence. And that's only one of, well, virtually an infinite number of octaves. I'm told it's not infinite, but it hardly matters. It'll take you a long, long time to count them all. So, here we are. Here's where we're going. Okay. The key to understanding how to move from one world to another begins with just a basic idea of sacred geometry and begins by locating a geometrical figure that is shaped like this. It's known as a star tetrahedron. You're looking at the hands of God, by the way. So this image, again, is around our bodies. There's also a tube that runs through the body and connects in with the apexes of these star tetrahedral fields. And by the way, the field pointing up is male, the one pointing down is female, and this represents male and female energy in perfect balance. So, there's more here. There's actually 3 of these fields. And in their dormant state, they're superimposed over each other. One of them is the physical body. It literally is the physical body. One of them is the emotional body, and the third one is the mental body. So it's the combination of learning how to breathe through this tube, and in addition to that, learning how to rotate these fields at near the speed of light, actually ultimately through the speed of light. Let me just take a moment to go into that. The physical body, it stays put and does not rotate. Now, the mental star tetrahedral field, it is electrical in nature and it is male, and it rotates to the left. And it's the entire star tetrahedral field that represents the mental body that rotates to the left. And at the same time, the emotional field rotates to the right. It's magnetic in nature and it is female. So this gives you these counter-rotating fields and rotating at up to 9/10 the speed of light, ultimately through the speed of light. And when you go through the speed of light, you would disappear from this world and reappear in whatever world that you had tuned to. So this is called the Merkaba, the vehicle of ascension. And here again is what a living field looks like around the body. Okay. Well, let me just shift gears here a little bit. And I want to stop and just ask a question. The question is real simple. Why are all these changes happening now? I mean, if it's really true that we're sitting on a planet that is very much in process of making dimensional change. If that's true, my question is, why is it happening now? You know, why not 1 million years from now? Why not 20,000 years ago? Why now? Well, in order to answer that question, we need to take a look at a certain movement that the Earth makes. We all know that the axis is tilted 23.5 degrees. So that gives us our 4 seasons. But there's more. The axis itself is in a wobble. It's a very slight wobble. It changes 1 degree every 72 years. No big deal. Over the course of 2,160 years, it changes the viewpoint of 1 constellation. And over 25,920 years, it makes 1 complete revolution. And if you could see that from the North Pole, it would be an elliptical pattern. So here it is, just slightly less than 26,000 years to make 1 complete revolution. And this is known as the precession of the equinoxes. Well, what's been noticed by people who've done the research is that, first of all, here we are nearest to the center of the galaxy. Here, obviously, we're furthest away. And that we're moving around this ellipse in a counterclockwise direction. What's been noticed is that when we start moving away from the center of the galaxy, we as a planet just go to sleep. Then, when we turn the corner and start coming back, we start waking up. Well, this 26,000-year cycle has been divided into various segments that are called yugas. There's 4 of them that repeat themselves, first in the descending and then in the ascending cycle. And they range from maybe as little as about 1,500 years to maybe about 5,000 years in length. And what also has been noticed, and this is mainly through the work of the Hindus and the Tibetans, that there are 2 points in this cycle that are associated with tremendous change. And I do mean tremendous. And they're not the obvious points, not the points right here and here. Rather, 2 points about 900 years removed on either side. These are the 2 points where tremendous change is most likely to happen on the planet. And guess what? Here we are, sitting right on the bubble, sitting right on the horizon point, where we go from awake to asleep, and we go from asleep to awake. We're waking up.
But why are some not awake? Why are some not awake yet? You would think
That's an interesting
everybody would
question.
be.
Let's just hold that for
Yeah.
a minute and we'll come back to it.
Go on.
So, these 2 points are associated with tremendous change, and that includes nothing less than the poles shifting. Well, Thoth says there's a mathematical relationship between the degree of the pole shifting and the consciousness on the planet. Evidently, there's a mathematical integration between the 2. So that would suggest that depending on how big of a change we make, how much we wake up, in other words, that we can have a direct say in the outcome of these events.
Wow.
Well, here's a book you might want to look at called Pole Shift, and it gives you basically anything you ever wanted to know about pole shifts, probably a lot of stuff you didn't want to know too, ranging from all the scientific predictions to the prophecies of all sorts of different people, from Nostradamus to Edgar Casey and a number of people in between. Well, for those of us who live in California, we've been hearing stories for a long, long time of California falling into the ocean, I'm happy to report that when I last looked, it was still here. But people who've done the research here, considering that when you look at this, you're looking at 1,000-mile-an-hour surface winds, you're looking at entire continents moving up and down, and that could generate a little bit of fear, and it in fact has done so. But here we are in California, and we're doing just fine. I'm not trying to generate fear because there's something else going on here. And it's very likely that this is going to be a much more gentle ride this time around. A much more controlled ride from one world to another. If you look at the book, Pole Shift, they don't really know for sure, but they suspect that the North Pole was somewhere in the Hudson Bay. The Earth's magnetic pole was definitely in the Hawaiian Islands, and they know that because they've gone to ancient lava fields. And when you go to the lava fields, there's the iron pilings that line up as they harden. They're not perfect spheres, so they're going to harden and they're going to line up to the magnetic North Pole. And if you take 3 of them and cross them, definitely the North Pole was in the Hawaiian Islands. Well, this cycle, this precession needs to be understood. This is why these changes are happening now, and why we probably can't go a whole lot longer before these changes happen. Okay, obviously you're looking at seashells, and you would logically expect the place to find seashells is at the ocean. Yet they have been found in the Rocky Mountains. The Rocky Mountains are 14,000 feet high in some places. They have been found in Lake Titicaca. It's more than 12,000 feet high. Now, this is baby Dima. And Dima, along with Mom and Pop, probably some of her friends, one day were just minding their business, eating their lunch in the tropics. And then all of a sudden, they were frozen almost instantly. Frozen so solid that some of that food in their stomach is probably still edible today. Well, this is all out of the Zoological Museum in St. Petersburg, Russia. And you see, when the poles do shift, it all happens in the space of 20 hours. That's pretty quick. The first thing that happens is the magnetic pole shift. Now, the magnetic poles have been displaying some strangeness. If you go back about 35 or 40 years, this is when birds in their migration patterns all of a sudden begin to find themselves in strange new places. They were just following what they thought was the magnetic patterns, the magnetic fields. In the late 1990s, it became a bit more of an adventure to land airplanes. And so, in order to keep the planes from landing in cornfields, they had to recalibrate. There's different theories as to what causes the poles to shift. There's this guy, Brown, who says that considering the buildup of ice at the Antarctica, and it's 2.5 to 3 miles thick in some places, that in combination with the fact that here you can see the South Pole, and you've got this huge buildup of ice that's building up off-center. So you have a sphere, planet Earth, that's moving through space at top speeds, and you have this huge mass, this huge weight that's off-center. And so evidently the Brown theory says that at some point it's just going to break off and start racing towards the equator at about the speed of 1,700 miles an hour. There is a more modern theory. It's It's actually a bit more than a theory because this has been demonstrated in laboratories. And that is, there is the surface rock that we're familiar with. But there's also rock just beneath the Earth's core here. And under normal conditions, this rock is a solid. But when the Earth's magnetic field goes to zero, this rock becomes a liquid. And I think you can use your imagination to see what that might do. What you're looking at here is the vision of a man by the name of Gordon Michael Scallion. And in the early 1990s, he had what he called an awakening, given him the ability to see future events. This vision was somewhere between 1997 and 2001. And you can see that there's some major changes. Obviously, they haven't happened yet. Here's another group that virtually the same time was seeing a very similar future. Denver is the new West Coast seaport. And take a look. Take a look at Africa, Europe, not to mention the Western US. Okay. So, here we are on planet Earth. In tremendously accelerated times. But let me just say a thing or two here. If you look at mathematics, you're going to find that there's a number of different mathematical configurations. They're called mathematical sequences. And just to give a couple examples, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, mathematical sequence. 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, another mathematical sequence. Think about these as, if you have 3 consecutive numbers, that's all you need in order to figure out the whole thing. The exception would be the logarithmic one. But for any other, and there's lots of different sequences, if you've got 3 consecutive numbers, you've got the whole thing. So if you've got 4, 5, and 6, you've got the entire sequence. If you've got 8, 16, and 32, you can figure out the entire sequence. And that's so because our mind is actually arranged in 3 compartments. Even though we're sitting here in polarity consciousness and we think of duality, fact is, there's no such thing. Because for any polarity you think of, there's always going to be that 3rd component. If you've got up and down, you've got the middle. If you've got black and white, you've got gray. No matter what you think of, you're always going to find that there's a 3rd component there. Space is arranged in the same way. You've got the macrocosm, you've got the space in which we live, and you've got the microcosm. Time is past, present, and future. So you're going to find this 3-ness is in everything. So here we are, sitting on planet Earth in 2011, and the point is that in order to know where we are and what's going to be happening in the near future, all this stuff about 2012 and what's going on and what does it mean, we can't really know where we are or where we're going unless we know our past. It's absolutely essential. If you look at plant growth, they use the Fibonacci sequence to determine their pattern of growth. So you've got a plant first growing 1 leaf, then growing 1 more, and before it continues, it's as though it takes a moment to take a look at where it is in combination with where it came from to tell it where to go. So that tells it to grow 2 leaves. So now it's at 2, and where it came from is 1 in combination with where it is tells it it's time to grow 3 leaves, and so on. So it keeps going in this Fibonacci sequence, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and so on. And that's organic structure. Well, if you look at our history, from the viewpoint of conventional wisdom, that is, you know, everything supposedly started somewhere around 3800 BC in Sumeria. Before that, there was evidently nothing but hairy barbarians. And here we are, the end product of all of that, and man, there's nothing greater than us. Well, maybe not. Because this Earth has a history that goes back about 500 million years, where you've got life forms that are probably so much more advanced than where we are right now that we can't even imagine. Not even on this level, if we figure out where the heck they were. Because the star seed, our Mother Earth, is actually a star seed, where life forms have come from all over. They've combined with each other, formed new life forms, and they've gone on. Actually, they've moved through 5 different stages of development here, and then at the appropriate moment, they left. We happen to be on the second of these 5 levels right now. Second of 5 levels. So I'm just going to give you a few pieces of evidence that just kind of tend to poke a hole in this 3800 BC beginning. And a real good place to start is to go to the Giza Plateau and take a look at the Great Pyramid. And for all you've probably heard about the slave labor and the ramps and whatever in the construction of this pyramid, well, if that's true, then why is it that in recent times the Japanese, trying to build a Great Pyramid only 1/3 the size of the Giza Pyramid, using modern day technology, were not able to do it? Didn't have enough ramps, I guess. Let's look at the Sphinx. And here's a man who did, a man by the name of R.A. Schwaller de Lewis. And looking at the wear pattern on the Sphinx, which is as much as 12 feet deep in some areas, his conclusion was it was very unlikely that this type of erosion could have been caused by sand. I mean, you're in the Sahara Desert, sand and wind erosion. It looked a whole lot more like water to him. John Anthony West picked up the ball and ran with it. He stepped outside of the box. He brought in an American geologist, this man, a man by the name of Robert Schoch. And Robert Schoch proved beyond any doubt whatsoever that the wear patterns come from rain, not from wind. And that furthermore, there needed to be a minimum of 1,000 years of non-stop torrential rain, which is not likely. But even if that's true, what you have here is, considering that the Sahara Desert is somewhere between 7,000 to 9,000 years of age, this means that the Sphinx has got to be minimum 8,000 to 10,000 years old. Well, who did it? Thoth says the Sphinx is at least 5.5 million years old. He's got no idea who did it. So, let's move on. Let's go back to Sumeria and take a look at these clay tablets that have fairly recently been a language called cuneiform. And on these tablets, there's some rather interesting information, including the planets, their distances from the sun, some exact information not only about the planets, but also about the precession of the equinoxes. Now, considering that the minimum amount of observation of the night sky to even determine that there is a precession of the equinoxes is 2,160 years, how do these guys know about that? On Easter Island, these hats only weigh 10 tons. Here you're looking at Baalbek, Lebanon. It's called the Trilithon, and these blocks happen to weigh 800 tons. They had to be moved at least 1/3 of a mile. Go to Peru, you've got the famous Nazca lines that can only be seen from the air. Now look at this one. Are they trying to tell us something here? Well, obviously, this is all the work of hairy barbarians, right? Okay. So, let's just take a very brief look at our history. And according to Thoth, to begin, we have been around a little more than 200,000 years. For some time, we were in Lemuria, about 70, maybe 80,000 years. When it sank, we moved to Atlantis. And when we were in Lemuria and on Atlantis, we were on a much higher level of awareness than we are right now, a much higher dimensional level, and we also were in a unified state. We were in harmony with our world. We were not in a separate state that we are in right now. But let's go back, here we are right here. Let's go back about 16,000 years, right about here. This is the point to where, well, the problems really started to happen, because this is where we violated galactic law. Actually, it was a portion of us. There was a group of us who came in, stepped into our evolutionary pattern from Mars. It was actually the group of Martians who, in trying to take control of the Earth, created an energy field that went completely out of control and almost killed the Earth.
Oh, wow.
Well, that caused us, when we reached this point about 3,000 years later, to fall many, many dimensional levels. In essence, we were in free fall until finally we crash landed down here on the third dimensional aspect of the reality. And in combination with that, we had our memories erased. We were back to square one. So let's take a look now at some of the prophecies. Let's see what the Hopis and the Mayans are saying about the times we're in. Hopis have been trying to tell us for a long, long time that if we continue in this separate state, that we're looking at a very uncertain future indeed. Need to take a moment here and talk a little bit about Hopi prophecy. The idea I want to introduce to you is that of a Kachina. Now, a Kachina is simply a member of the Hopi tribe who lives a good life. You know, he obeys the laws of the Creator, obeys the laws of the Hopi, and when he dies, he's given something very special. He's able to go beyond the intermediate worlds and directly into the next universe, and he becomes a Kachina. Kachina means respected spirit, calming spirit, in just about all the ancient languages. So you're looking at one of the invisible forces of life that comes back periodically to assist humankind in our evolutionary development. Now, according to Hopi prophecy, when the blue Kachina, and the blue Kachina, the Kachinas are impersonated by men wearing masks during the dances, in the night dances. And they become one, literally, with the Kachinas that they're representing. Their identity fuses with the Kachina. The Hopi prophecy says that when the Kachina, the blue Kachina, is seen in the night dances, that is to be followed shortly thereafter by the appearance of the blue star Kachina in the heavens, and that will open up the window, putting us into the end times? Well, on October 24th, 2007, Congress